Evening, everybody. How's it going? Comic Crack here with you. A little bit something different that maybe I'm going to do on a weekly basis. We'll see how I feel. It was a great chat this afternoon with Larasa and Damien. So if you haven't watched that and you want to tune in, have a look. Should be the video directly under this one in my feed there in the video feed. As usual with some of these things, I wanted to do a little bit of a shorter video where I just kind of highlight a couple of the books that I read this week, just so you can get a bite-sized chunk. And then if you want to go in and hear more detail on these books that I spoke about here and other books that we talked about in the stream, you're more than welcome to have that playing in the background. So one of the things that I read this week that I wanted to highlight, we were talking about Palookaville. So issues 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then number 9 that I ended off on. So this is the It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken storyline. It's collected in a volume all to itself as well, apparently smaller than comic size. And I had kind of been reminded of it by Mind the Comics, as I've spoken about before in Twitter, and realized that I did have the issues. I just traded and got some of these to fill in the blanks. And it was just an amazing story. Completely just captured my attention the moment I started reading. So there you can see one of the guest appearances by Chester Brown. Chester Brown, Seth, and Joe Matt being kind of part of that crew. This story takes place in 1987, I believe. So he had said that it's before he knew Joe Matt, and it's kind of focused on him as an individual and also as a character, and his kind of fascination for kind of the olden days or the way things used to be, and specifically in this one, his interest in comics and cartoons, and starting to get into comic strips like cartoonists, and specifically a guy named Kalo, supposedly from the New Yorker magazine. Jared Osborne was in the chat this afternoon too, and was saying that actually it turns out that Kalo was an invention of Seth's, which I wasn't aware of. So that was a good chunk of information. So it's kind of this idea about him getting these little glimpses of this artist that he really identifies with, and his friends even say that there's so many similarities between his style and this Kalo's style. And just kind of his uncovering all this information, going and visiting his hometown. It turns out he grew up in Ontario as well for a bit, and kind of tracking down more information and kind of going through life as just Seth. I thought it was a really well done story. I thought it was just really... It's amazing. And I mean, in one of the letters sections, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Chris Ware. The letter sections in these two, by the way, are incredible. And it's something that I didn't mention in the stream today. You get all sorts of comics people in here. Like I said, Chris Ware, Adrian Tomine is in here in this particular issue, etc. Sorry, the snow. Did I finish that sentence? He loved the way that Seth drew the snow in these strips. Let's see if there's another exterior shot here with some... There we go. Yeah, the page that we already saw. So that's very recommended. And I mean, again, Seth is someone that's growing on me the more I dig in. We were also discussing the Mr. X run, and Seth had done a bunch of that first volume as well, and it's another great read, especially if you're interested in seeing an artist develop their style. It feels like it started out where he was sort of mimicking the Hernandez brothers a little bit at the beginning, but then throughout the progression of the rest of the kind of volume, he starts to find his own voice, and then by the end of that volume, it really is... You can see that it's now Seth. It's still in that world and still has those influences, but you can see a lot more of his voice. And then this Palookaville, it's fully fleshed out, right? Like this is him, and then above and beyond. So Clyde fans, Dominion, etc. You know what I mean? The Wimbledon Green is the one that I'm trying to remember. So that was a really fantastic read and an easy one. Once I started, I couldn't stop, and it just read really nicely in one sitting, which is unusual for me. That doesn't always happen. The other thing we talked about, which I won't go into detail here, we read the first 2 issues of Velvet, or reread them rather. Got the first and second printing here. That's going to be something that continues on throughout the streams. But we sat and talked about the first 2. And I mean, what can I say that we didn't say there? I'm enjoying it so far, and I remember loving it the first time I read it too. But this reread, it's always interesting when you reread some of this stuff and just have that kind of perspective and have that kind of space between when it was coming out and kind of a new, looking at it with new eyes to some degree. We'll end on that one. So the other one that completely turned me into a fanboy last night, so much so that I raved about it with my son this morning. This is Wonder Woman Dead Earth issue 3 and issue number 4. So thankfully, Book Fair was able to find a copy of issue number 3 for me, and it was another one. I sat down. I was just going to read this issue last night. That changed pretty damn quick. What a book! I cannot recommend this one enough. This was a lot of fun. It had some really great intense moments. And if you haven't read it, I'm about to just pull some spoilers, so I'll give you 5 seconds to pause the video or skip ahead about a minute and a half. So, I mean, the thing that I loved about it and the thing that I ended up raving about, like I spoke about with issue number 1, when she kind of gets revived, comes up the stairs, realizes that she's in Wayne Manor, and sees the corpse of Batman on the sofa, basically. That was a moment where it really hit me of like, oh, this is going to be quite a story. So in these ones, she goes and visits Superman. Anybody just joining, I see a couple people just popped in. I'm about to deliver spoilers for Dead Earth, so if you haven't read it and you want to, just be forewarned. So at one point she goes to visit Superman to try to see what's going on there, and is met at the door by a robot. And then the pieces really start falling into place in this issue, that it was actually Diana that was responsible for the destruction of Earth. That it was the bracelets that are on her arms are really just controlling the immense power that she has. And because there was this battle between the Amazons and humanity, or humans, the humans sent all these missiles to destroy the Amazons, to wipe them off the face of the planet. She goes into, her mom takes off the bracelets and says, basically, you know, go save us. This is what you were created for. She goes to kind of destroy all the bombs, and, you know, some success, but mostly no success whatsoever. Superman then flies in and kind of apologizes because he was saying there was a missile going for Smallville. I had to go protect my parents. I'm sorry I wasn't here. And then you can see by her glowing eyes, she just loses her shit. And it's an epic battle between Wonder Woman and Superman, where you get fantastic fucking pages like this with her just beating the shit out of him, to the point that she knocks his ass all the way back to his Fortress of Solitude, breaks into some kryptonite, and proceeds to punch a fucking hole through his goddamn chest, and kills Superman, completely obliterates him. And it was just amazing. So if that wasn't amazing enough, before we get to the end of the story, she's deciding she has to go, and the Amazons have now been kind of mutated into these monsters, and they're still attacking and want to rid the planet of humans. She's going to help the humans And she realizes she's going to need some extra help because she doesn't have her full strength back. So she goes to Superman's corpse and rips his skull and spine out of his body so she can use it as a fucking weapon to beat the shit out of the monsters, basically, or the Amazons in the final issue, which is basically just a huge battle for the most part. And she just destroys them. It's an incredible 4 issues, but that kind of stuff right there. I haven't read any of the other Black Label books. I don't have that much interest, to be honest, but reading and enjoying this so much. It's like, again, it's like what I remember enjoying about the Elseworld stuff from DC, that idea of you can create a story with these characters out of continuity, do whatever you want. The understanding with everybody involved is that this is the story in this little moment. That's it. And that works for me. So reading this just reminds me how much I loved the Elseworld stuff. So I can't recommend this much higher. And that's kind of been my reading of this week. Everything that I've read, I feel like last week I was talking about one of the issues that I have with reading stuff is I expect everything that I read to kind of blow me away. And sometimes things are just good. And there's nothing wrong with that about maintaining and stuff. But skipping ahead to this week, it really feels like I've read a lot of stuff that has kind of blown me away, to be honest. And the final one that I'll talk about is Modesty Blaze, book 1, the Gabriel setup. I really, really got into this. I just read one story at a time. No, not quite the end, Damien. Close to the end, though. I'm just kind of doing a wrap up of stuff that we talked about today in our chat. And I don't know, man. Like, again, we talked about it this afternoon, and the fact that there's this kind of rich history. So far, it feels like there's this rich history of these strong female characters throughout some comics. Is really appealing to me. And this one just really stood out. I mean, the art is incredible. I think there was a few different artists, 3 different artists throughout the history of this, but this is Jim Holdaway doing the art here. And I really, really like it. And one of the things that I didn't point out this afternoon that I wanted to draw attention to is where it says the Gabriel setup there in that beautiful font. This story apparently takes place in Winnipeg, which is amazing. I love when that kind of stuff pops up. Unfortunately, a few pages later, we find out that Winnipeg is now located in Ontario. So they missed it by that much, missed it by 1 province. But the flow of these, the one thing that I thought wouldn't work so well was this presentation of these strips, and that it wouldn't really read as nicely as a story, that they might feel a little disjointed. And I'm surprised at how well, when you put them on a page and put them in a book, how well they read together. One of these stories, there's an introduction of what Peter O'Donnell says what his intention at first was to have kind of a Moriarty type of character for Modesty and Willie, and he abandoned that idea. Apparently the character makes another appearance later on, but then that's it. He just didn't, it didn't work for him, that idea. And this is this Gabriel character in this final story. And again, Gore Vidal has talked about it too, and he has a really great video where he goes into a little more detail about Modesty Blaze, but her relationship with the people around her, she's clearly the one in charge. At one point, there's a story in here where Willie is kind of said, hey, do you want to, this guy that they're working for sort of says, would you like to, I'd like you to go and look into X, Y, and Z. And he says, I'll have to ask Modesty. And he gets really pissed off and says, well, I thought you'd want to get away from that. He's like, no, this is our deal. She's in charge. I'm fine with that. I'm going to check with her. If she says it's okay for me to go and do this mission solo, I'll do it. If she says no, then I'm not going to do it. Like, our relationship is too important and has worked so well for both of us that I'm not going to let anything come in between it, you know? And just Modesty taking control of her own life, like really just dispatching some of the men in her life Like I talked about before, the opening couple of pages here, or page 2, a no longer welcome gentleman caller is dispatched pretty quickly, and pinned to the ground, and this is your final chance. You can walk away from this, or we can continue with this kind of game. And I really like that kind of stuff. So I am anxious to get into more Modesty Blaze. Incredibly anxious, actually, that I'm probably going to skip. I have another volume on the shelf that I've read kind of half of. I might dig into that a little bit tonight and see how that fares. Another thing that I didn't talk about this week in our chat is I dug into Roberta Gregory's Naughty Bits. I just read issue number 6 here, and it was much better than I had thought. She's not a creator that I had followed that much. I know about her, and I know about her character Bitchy Bitch, and I do remember seeing Naughty Bits quite a lot back when they were coming out, but it just wasn't something that I got into as much. And this was a fun story. She goes through this kind of a hippie phase, and it's this sort of rebellion against her parents, who are incredibly religious, and she kind of falls in with this kind of the cool hip crowd and stuff. And you can see kind of how that works out for her, and the manipulations that are happening even in that crowd. And it was pretty good. It was an entertaining read. It was pretty damn funny. So I've got only 2 other issues. I haven't dug into this one yet. And then I've got one in the boxes there that, considering how long it ran, it's not a title that I see all over the place. Like, what issue do we got here? Yeah, I mean, going from this one is issue number 6, and then bouncing ahead to issue number 32. And then the other titles that she did a lot of work in comics over those years. It's surprising that it doesn't pop up more. And then, did I pull it out here? Let's see, maybe it's up here. Oh yeah, here we go. And then finally, Joe Matt's Peep Show. After I finished reading the Palookaville story from Seth, I dug into some Joe Matt. So Joe Matt, out of those 3, he's the one that I've kind of been a fan of for the longest. And his portrayal of this trio of friends is very unique from everybody else's. So this is some stuff. There was a collection of some Peep Show stuff, and I don't remember if this is in it. I don't think that this story that's presented in these 2 comics is in it. And it's Joe as a kid, and kind of a little douchebag, to be honest. But why would that change when it comes to Joe Matt and how he portrays himself? The other nice thing about these Drawn and Quarterly single issues is the cover stock, this kind of heavier stock. It makes a really nice presentation, and it feels like the colors and everything are I don't know, they just sit differently on this. So overall, I enjoyed this story. I mean, it's really tough with Joe Matt because he just portrays himself sometimes as just so unlikable. But there's something appealing about that you just keep coming back, or I keep coming back to it, that I want to see what kind of nonsense he's going to do next. So like I said, I don't think this one is in the collected Peep Show. So that's kind of nice. And again, it's not a title that I see out there very much. So, and I think that's about it. Future I've talked about a couple of times now. Was there anything else? Have a quick scan. No, there's not. There's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to read and put stuff away, but I just keep pulling out new stuff to put on reading piles. And I mean, you know the way that goes. When I was cleaning out recently, I found a whole bunch of these old kind of zines and stuff in a box. We're doing a big overhaul of the basement here. We bought some new shelving, doing a big cleanse. Some GX Jupiter Larson from the Haters. He had a little zine there for a little bit. So I've got a couple of issues of those. Here's another. This is GX Jupiter Larson again. Scraps of paper. So this was fun to find these. I haven't thought about these or looked at these in forever. Couple more zines. More zines, more music style zines. Kitchener-Waterloo, where I used to live, there was one of the record shops, Orange Monkey. I think this was something that they put out themselves. I don't remember exactly. And then a whole bag filled with kind of mail order zines from some grindcore and noise labels and stuff. So that's probably another thing I'm going to dig through tonight. That's it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Damien, nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us again this afternoon. And we'll talk to you all later. We'll see you next week.